Class. Today we are going to cover parentheses, kind of building up to doing PEMDAS, order of operations. But we got to know how to use our parentheses. Now, in a basic sense, our parentheses are primarily going to be used to where, in a basic sense, you work what's inside of the parentheses first. But as you advance to a more difficult class, you might not be able to simplify what's in the parentheses first. So we got to know how the operations on the outside of the parentheses can be related to their operations on the inside of parentheses, primarily the distributive property and how that multiplication works through that distributive property. Now, obviously, if we had a simple example here, let's see if I can get my pen to work. It was okay, so if you had a opportunity where you had 2 plus 3 plus 5 times 8, what you would do first is the parentheses. And like I said, we'll get to the order of operations. We're just kind of going through each piece. But you do the inside of the parentheses first, which means in this case, you would do 2 plus, you would add the 3 and 5 together, which would give you an 8. And then you'd have the times 8 on the outside. You wouldn't do 2 plus 3 plus 5 times 8. So you wouldn't add the 2 and the 3 first, and then add the 5 and get 10, and then multiply times 8 and get 80. That is not how you would do it. You would do what's inside of the parentheses first. That's typically what parentheses are there for, to let you know that these need to be done together, and we need to do them first. Just to finish this out here in a basic sense, 8 times 8, we'll do the multiplication next. 8 times 8 is 64, so we've got 2 plus 64, which would give us a 66. Okay, but like I said, as we advance to further and further math classes, most of the time here, when we're doing the distributive property, especially with these parentheses, you can't simplify the inside, which is why we want to use that distributive property. The distributive property basically just says that if you have a multiplication times a parentheses, you have to apply that multiplication and distribute it to each of the terms of the parentheses. Now we need to define what a term is, because this is where it confuses some students. A term is an individual term in a piece that is added or subtracted. So here we have 2 times 4 plus 9w, all in parentheses. When we distribute this 2 to the terms inside these parentheses, the 4 is a term and the 9w is a term. Okay? Anything that's multiplied together is considered one term. So I only need to apply the 2 to the 9w. I don't need to apply it to the 9 and to the w. But I also do have to apply it to the 4 because that piece is added. So each term that's added or subtracted needs to get that 2, but every single little number and letter does not get that 2. So when we distribute here, we distribute the 2 to the 4 and to the 9w, the 9w being a single term. So 2 times 4, I'm going to just write it out in a simple sense here. That's 2 times 4 plus 2 times 9w. Okay? And then we can simplify further because 2 times 4 is 8. And then 2 times 9 is 18. So this is your simplified answer. 8 plus 18w. Like I said, 9w is in of itself considered one term, not two terms. The w is a term. The 4 is a term, and the 9w is a term. Okay? 4, 9, and w aren't all separate terms. The 4 is a separate term. The 9w is considered in of itself one separate term, so I only distribute the 2 to that whole term, not to each of that little pieces. Let's try the next one. I've got negative 8 parentheses 6x plus 3. I need to distribute the negative 8 to the 6x and to the 3. Remember that 6x is considered one term and that 3 is considered one term. Okay, so we're distributing the negative 8 to the 6x and to the 3. So we can simplify this by saying this negative 8 times 6x plus negative 8 times 3. Now, negative 8 times 6, don't use your calculator. What's negative 8 times 6? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Should be 42, right? Okay, I tried to give you a little time there to work it on your own. Hopefully you got it much faster than the 5 countdown that I had to do for you. So we've got negative 42x, and then negative 8 times 3 is, don't use your calculator, do that mental math, figure it out. Negative 8 times 3 is negative 24. Okay? Now, once you get good at this, you can probably, skip some of these intermediate steps here and go straight from here to the final answer, which is fine if you feel like you're up to that. But if you're not feeling confident, take it step by step. Okay? I'm going to change colors and go down to the next line. All right, here I have negative 4 times negative 4d minus 5. I'm going to distribute the negative 4 to both of these terms. So negative 4 times negative 4d and negative 4 times negative 5. I'm going to write the whole thing out. Negative 4 times negative 4d minus, so here's where we want to keep up with the negative, okay? So here I'm going to do negative 4, just to stay consistent, times negative 5. Now, what you should see here is I have a minus, a negative in two negatives multiplied in both situations. Negative 4 times negative 4 is going to give you a positive 16d, and negative 4 times negative 5 is going to give you a positive 20. Okay? Don't lose track of your negatives here. It can be very easy to do. That's why I tried to write it consistently for you here. Okay? Negative 4 distributed to the negative 4d. Negative 4 also distributed to the negative 5. Negative times a negative gives us a positive in both cases, and we simplified it down. Now let's look at the next one. I've got negative 6 times, in parentheses, 8p plus 3. We're going to distribute this negative 6 to the 8p, and we're going to distribute this negative 6 to the 3. All right. If it helps you, you can even put the plus here. If it helps you, that's fine. Just remember these terms here aren't multiplied. These are two separate terms here, and then we're going to add them back together. All right, now negative 6 times 8, did this above, it's negative 42p. Now, negative 6 times 3 should give you a negative 18. Hopefully we're rocking and rolling by now. We're on number 4. We're going to continue working down. If you're having any trouble with some problems, pause it, try to do it on your own, and then hit play after that and check it to make sure you got it right. Let's move on to the next line. So I'm going to change colors again here so that we're not confusing any of the lines with the next. So here I have 2 parentheses 3v minus 8. Okay, I'm going to distribute this 2 to this first term and this second term so that I have 2 times 3v and then 2 times negative 8. Now, 2 times 3 is 6, so I get 6v, and then 2 times negative 8 is negative 16. Okay? Alright, now this next one is written a little different. I have 2 times 2 minus 5m times negative 5. Okay? Tried to jump ahead of myself and distribute already. Now, just because the negative 5 is written on the right-hand side doesn't mean that we have to distribute in any different kind of way. Okay? Because this is essentially the same thing. You could even rewrite it this way. Negative 5 times 2 minus 5m. That's fine. Remember, with multiplication, the order does not matter. Which one comes first? Same thing here. We're just doing a simple multiplication, but one of the terms has a subtraction in it, so we're using the distributive property on it. Either way, all we're really doing, if you want to use it with this very first step, is distributing this negative 5 to both terms. If it makes you feel more comfortable to write the negative 5 first, that's fine. All we're still doing is just distributing it to both terms. So we're doing negative 5 times 2. So I'm going to write it like this, negative 5 times 2. And then we're doing negative 5 times negative 5m. Now we just have to simplify. Negative 5 times 2 is negative 10. And then negative 5 times negative 5m is positive 25m. Hopefully by now you're seeing the importance of why I was really pushing you and urging you to do that multiplication practice. Because if you're not good with your multiplication and you're having to stop at each one of these steps, pull out your calculator, and then type in these little small multiplications, it's really going to drag you down in the time in which you can do these problems. And we need to be able to knock these problems out quick, because all of your tests and quizzes going forward in college are going to be on a set time rate, so that you only have a certain amount of time to do it. Alright, had to take me a sip of water. Let's move on to the next one. I've got 4 parentheses negative 6z plus 4. We're going to distribute this 4 to both of these terms. Hopefully it's getting repetitive by this point and you're gaining some confidence. I'm going to distribute the 4 to both of those terms. So I've got 4 times negative 6z plus 4 times 4. How about that? Now 4 times negative 6 is negative 24z, and 4 times 4 is 16. We're good to go and we're done. Next one, I've got negative 9 times n minus 4. I just need to distribute that negative 9 to both terms. We've got negative 9 times n plus negative 9 times negative 4. If I simplify, it gives me negative 9n. And then negative 9 times negative 4 is positive 36. Like I said, the whole point in this is to gain some confidence as we go along. Some of these get a little more difficult, some of them are a little more easy, but we should be able to do all of them. We should definitely be able to do all of them. Alright, next one, I have parentheses negative 5d plus 1 times negative 2. All I'm doing here, like I said, the order might look a little different, but all I'm doing is distributing this negative 2 to both of these terms. Not a problem. I'm going to do negative 2 times negative 5d plus negative 2 times 1. That's going to give me negative 2 times negative 5 is positive 10. It's going to give me 10d. And then negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. Now, hopefully you can see that something that looks hard and looks like it might take a long time is actually not too difficult. Not too difficult. If you know what you're doing, you're distributing these terms. And right now we're doing especially easy ones because we're only doing one distribution. We're not doing the full method yet. We will get there, I promise. But we're just distributing one term through and simplifying. That's it. Let's continue on. I've got negative 4 times 9k plus 9. I just want to distribute this negative 4 to both of these terms. I've got negative 4 times 9k plus negative 4 times 9. Now, negative 4 times 9k is negative 36k. And then negative 4 times 9 is negative 36. Easy as can be. Alright. Now, here's what I'm going to do going forward, and I just want to see if you can try to keep up with it, okay? If you can't, then please take a moment, pause, work it. You need to be pausing and working these problems out before I work them out anyway, because it's always better to practice on your own, because I'm not going to be sitting here working the problems with you as you continue on through college. I'm not going to be sitting here working the problems with you as you're taking a test or a quiz. You've got to be able to do it on your own. So pause before each problem. If you hadn't done so yet, try it on your own, check the answer. Try it on your own, watch me and check the answer. Okay? So going forward, here's what I'm going to do with the rest of these problems. I'm going to show you the distribution step with arrows, and then I'm going to go straight to the answer. Because ideally, as we work these, that's what we should be able to do. We shouldn't have to write some intermediate steps. Now, if you're just now seeing this or just now remembering this, and this is really a hard brush up for you, by all means, take your time. That's what this class is for, to brush up on your materials. But keep in mind that we need to be able to get fluent with this, right? need to be able to be very fluent with this. Do these steps like they're nothing. That's why we're practicing them now before we start those college classes that are actually going to cause and be credit classes this fall. All right, let's do this. So I'm going to distribute this 2 here to this -5. I'm going to distribute the 2 to the -7j because the whole thing here says 2 times -5 times -7j. Now, 2 distributed to the -5 gives me -10. 2 distributed to the -7j gives me -14j. Boom. There you go. You have your answer. On to the next one. I'm distributing this -3 to the 3b. I'm distributing this -3 to the -2. You shouldn't even have to really read the whole problem. You should be able to look at it and focus it in your mind and know what's going on. Here we have 3b minus 2 times -3. We do the distribution steps. We're ready to go. -3 times 3 is -9b. -3 times -2, +6. On to the next one. This is where we should be. Got to work up this confidence and be able to rock and roll and go with it. Here we have -3 times 3 minus 8j. I'm going to distribute the -3 to both of these terms. -3 times 3 is -9. -3 times -8 is +24j. All right? Now, this is a little different. I've got negative parentheses -5 minus 3v. Now, in this case, all this negative is standing for is a -1 out front. Okay? We don't write the 1 because 1 times anything is itself. So that negative is just with that placeholder of that 1. We're distributing it to both of these terms. So you're basically just distributing the negative to both of these terms. Essentially -1 times -5 should give you a +5. And a -1 times a -3 should give you a +3. So I have 5 plus 3b. Essentially just distributing that negative. So anything that's negative turns positive, anything that's positive turns negative. In this case, we only have negatives, and those turn positive because we negated the negative. Awesome. All right, let's see what we got next. I'm trying to change colors, like I said, so we don't get confused as we go. Now I have -8 times 2 plus 9b. I'm going to distribute to both of those terms that -8. Now, -8 times 2 is -16. -8 times 9b is, so -8 times 9 is -72b. Here I'm distributing the -9 to the 8 and the -9 to the 2h because it's -9 times 8 minus 2h. -9 times 8 is -72 and -9 times -2h is +18h. So we should be picking up speed as we go. I think we're doing pretty good so far. Alright, here I have parentheses -5f plus 8 times 4. I'm going to distribute this 4 to both of these terms. So I've got 4 times -5f is going to give me -20f. And 4 times 8 is going to give me 32. So I have -20f plus 32. Alright, here I have 7x minus 8 times -1. I'm distributing this -1 to both of these terms. So I have -7x, and -1 times -8 gives us a +8. Okay? Alright, on to the last. Man, this is going quite well, I hope. Of course, I can't see on your side, and I pre-recorded this early. So, if you are struggling, that's fine. Just reach out to me and let me know if you need any extra practice. Otherwise, hopefully we're all rocking and rolling through this pretty well, and it's a good refresher. Here I have negative parentheses 6 minus 4p. Okay? All I'm doing is distributing this negative to both of these terms. So the 6 was positive, it turns negative, and the 4 was negative, so it turns positive. So I've got -6 plus 4p. Last but not least, I have 9 parentheses 8 plus 5t. I'm distributing the 9 to both of these terms. 9 times 8 is 72. 9 times 5t is 45t. And there we have it. So, parentheses. Remember, simplify anything inside of the parentheses first. That's a very basic step. It goes all the way back to like 4th grade, right? 4th, 5th grade, I think it's the first time that you see this. The distribution step, hey, that's a little more complicated, but we can do it. all we're doing is basically multiplication. We just have to keep track. Okay? Now, this distribution can get very much more complicated. Okay? So, watch this. I'm just going to zoom in here and write another. I wonder how far it'll let me zoom in so I can have a little more blank space. Alright, so we could have something like this. So, let me skinny up line. Okay. So, this distribution can get very much more complicated. We could have something that looks like negative 3 times 8x plus 6y plus 5z plus 2. Now, with something like this, this distribution still works the same way. Instead of having 2 terms, we have 5 terms to distribute to. We can do that. That's no problem. We just have to distribute 4 times instead of 2. We can use the distributive property for as many terms as we have in that parentheses. It's not at all a problem. For something like this, it's a little more complicated. We'll simplify down to negative 3 times 8, which is negative 24x, negative 3 times 6, which would be negative 18y, negative 3 times 5, which would be negative 15z, and negative 3 times 6, negative 3, what's going on? Negative 3 times 2, which would be negative 6. So like I said, it can get much more complicated, but it's still fairly simple. We will look at the FOIL method further on down the line here in another lecture, but for now, we have tackled the distributive method and how we deal with some parentheses. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Like I said, hopefully you practiced this worksheet before or as we were doing it and did some of them on your own before I completed them. You got to be able to do this on your own when it comes